All right. You maybe saw us sideways just a minute ago, but now we're right side up. So welcome. We're glad to have you here for how to not make things worse. How to not make things work. How to not make things worse, even when you're totally triggered. I'm Nathan M. McTague. This is my partner in life and business and all things fun, Natalie Christensen. Together, we're co-founders of the Center for Emotional Education. And for the last 12 years, we've been leading workshops and working one-to-one with the world's most powerful women who have been outrageously successful in pretty much every area of their life, but continue to struggle in a particular relationship or with relationship in general. And despite their usual creativity and prowess and power, they just can't seem to fix their way out of this one. So we support them to figure out how to get their needs met, maintain connection, and have more fulfilling relationships without giving themselves away.
This is true.
Yes, and we love our work, and again, we've been doing it for 12 years, but we weren't born knowing how to do relationship. We had a lot of the same struggles and experienced and went through a lot of the same foibles that pretty much everyone else does out there in terms of navigating relationships and doing it in such a way that feels good and where you can maintain connection and get your needs met. And it wasn't until we started having kids that we really tuned into the dynamic of relationship and how it works to either support or not support kind of like mutual agendas. And so learning through lots of research and study and then practice and then supporting other parents over the years and then moving into generalizing the work that we were doing to be around all relationships, because really what we found over and over again was the things that were applicable to parent-child relationships were applicable to all relationships in terms of the dynamics of how relationships work. So now between the two of us, we have something like 30,000 hours of research and study and practice working with clients and with ourselves in relational dynamics. And we bring that to bear for our clients and our students. And that's part of why we're here today, to share some of what we've learned with you. So,
we're going to start by refreshing your minds
yes,
about this thing called the feelings to issues continuum. I'm just going to remind you in our previous video, which was called Why We're So Triggered and How to Diffuse It. We talk about this idea that we think that we're just walking along and then a person or an issue pops up and gives us feelings. But in actuality, what's happening is that we have feelings on board, and then we walk through life and bump into something or someone that brings those feelings to the surface, because the feelings are trying to come up and out. So if they're in, you're going to find yourself with a person or in a situation that activates those feelings. Mm-hmm. So it's actually the reverse of what you would think. The feelings come first, then you find an issue that matches it.
we talked about this previously in terms of like putting on your Velcro suit, and the Velcro is the feelings that you haven't yet processed, and then the way that they stick to issues is how when you move through the world, how these feelings start to attract things to trigger them.
Right.
So, for example, a lot of folks think, oh well, traffic is something that annoys everyone. That's why we have road rage. But the research is really clear that road rage actually comes from suppressed feelings that we already have that are triggered by the experience of traffic, which happens to resonate with a particular frequency of feelings that is in the rage zone. And so it elicits rage from us that we already have, rather than actually inviting us or making us have.
Doesn't give you the rage, it just activates what you've already got.
Just brings it right out.
Yeah. Some other examples just from, I think even just today or yesterday with our clients. One client thought she hadn't cleaned her earrings well enough, and so that she had an ear infection, which went all the way to the I think I'm gonna die. Whereas maybe, so she had worry on board, and then she's like, I think my ears are infected, I think I'm gonna die. Whereas yesterday, when she didn't have such fear on board, she would have just been like, oh, I need to clean my ears. Mm-hmm. I need to make sure I keep up my regimen or whatever. And another client made a mistake in an email with one of her clients and went into the full bore, like, I'm a loser, our business is going to tank, my husband, it's all me, he's great, it's me, I'm the problem. And so I went into a full-on panic, and the idea, her thought was, I need to stop making mistakes because then I feel like a loser and I feel a lot of panic, which isn't possible. But really, she had that stuff on board, and then probably made a mistake because she had the feelings on board, and then attributed the mistake with the feelings.
And we'll talk about the resolution of that a little bit later in this session. But just to give you an idea of the kinds of examples that we mean, where we are taught that the feeling comes from the experience, when really the feeling is, in some ways, actually generating the experience.
Yes.
Now, most people wind up reacting to the issue, whatever it is, or the trigger, whatever it is, from that place of the feelings being on board, and their understanding and experience, it's colored by the feeling, and so they can't really tell even what's happening. But they react from that place instead of doing a feelings process first. And we think of this as one of the most common mistakes that humans make in responding to a perceived issue.
I think it's the mistake that humans are making in life in general. I think all of our problems typically boil down to this. Either somebody else in our sphere is reacting from this place, reacting from their feelings, or we are. And it creates a lot of problems.
And our reactivity triggering other people's reactivity, and just sort of like going down the line of trigger sharing.
Yeah, and so then we're all just in a trigger world
Yes.
with each other. We talked about this in our video called Why Feelings Suck. And this is because most of us, the majority of us, got some programming from our own childhood. Not because our parents were bad, but because they were dealing with their own trauma or whatever. So we were not, when we had emotion, we weren't responded to in a way that communicated to our systems that we were safe in having that emotion. We got a different kind of response that communicated that it's not safe to have emotion. And when we don't feel safe, we move into a survival brain state where we fight, flight, freeze, or appease. So this is what we're talking about. Like, I think this is the main problem that people have in their lives, is that emotion comes up, system thinks it's an emergency, they move into their survival brain, and then they act. And they act from the survival brain, but it can only do those 4 things. And so they either yell at somebody, they bail out, they quit their job, they move cross country with no plan, something, or they appease, where it's like, I think of it as like self-prostitution, where you do something that's wrong for you in order to purchase what you think might be safety. Or freeze. And freeze can look like binge drinking, or binge Netflix watching, or can't get out of bed, or can't leave the house, or have no words, like your mouth doesn't move, you don't have any thoughts.
Yeah. Binge watching can also sometimes go, or binge drinking can also go in the category of flight, because you're fleeing from your reality. But there's that way in which it can have a flavor of both flight or freeze.
There's also, like, you can choose to binge watch and feel totally in alignment with that. That's not what we're talking about.
That's not the triggered version.
We're not anti-Netflix.
Yeah. Okay. So if you don't want to do that, we have some suggestions of what to do instead. Today we're going to spend time on what that looks like to do for yourself. And in future workshops, we'll talk about how to do that and how to hold space for someone else. So the first thing is...
And this is just something you just have to hold as like a rule, like picture your hands handcuffed. But the number one thing is to not act from your survival brain. So if you're up, if you're triggered, don't act. And that is extremely hard to do, because one of the things your survival brain tells you is, hurry, deal with this now. Like, take names, knock heads, whatever you gotta do it now. So it's very counterintuitive to wait. But your best friend, number one thing, is to not act. Don't send that text. Don't send that email. Don't head out in the car. Don't bring up a topic, in order to change it. Like, don't act. Those are all forms of action. And survival brain is not good at life, not good at relationships, not good at things in general. So you don't want it in charge of your actions. Don't act.
And this is also true even if you're not triggered to a full-on survival reaction. So even if you're just feeling really upset about it, and you're in touch with that as a feeling, it's way better to do the feelings before you act. But you actually have an example of acting before you've done this that you wanted to share.
Yeah, and I'd like to share this story and say years and years ago I did this thing, but this was like 2 weeks ago or something.
Yeah.
I acted from my survival brain, and this is just to show you how it actually goes worse for you when you did. So I was under time pressure. We had a dinner engagement, and we had like bailed out on the one before.
Oh yeah.
So there was added pressure to like be there, be on time, like actually show up. And then we got into a discussion that was activating for me, and you were like, hey, let's just process this for a second. And I'm like, I can't. I got to run to the store and get the food and then come back and make the food so that we can make it to the dinner on time.
And pick up Echo. Who was at a
Pick up our
friend's
daughter
house.
too.
So there was another element.
Yeah, I was like, I can't. I have to do it. And so I leave the house, crying as I'm driving, and then I hit the car in front of me. And then...
Not hard, but a bump enough to make the person get out and have the whole side of the road thing.
Because as I'm driving, I don't pick it up. I see a text come in from our daughter saying, sorry, Mom, I know you're coming to pick me up, but I'm not leaving. You can't make me. I refuse to be in agreement with you. I refuse to follow through on our agreement. And so I see that. I'm already upset. I hit the car. And of course, because I'm in my survival brain, I then engage in an interaction with the other driver where he's not that nice. And I'm like, oh. And he inspects his car. It takes forever. He's looking underneath. He gets out a notebook. And so time is ticking. More time is going by. I go to the grocery store to get the food and responding to texts from our daughter who's still saying, sorry, you can't pick me up. I buy groceries that are all bad.
Yeah.
Unrelated to what we need.
I forgot that part.
Wrong products. The one kid, it's really important. Raspberry, not strawberry. I get strawberry jam. Big jar of it. Really big.
Yeah, it was a huge jar of jam.
Then I go to pick up the kid who refuses to be picked up. She doesn't even come out of the house. The other parent comes out, and I end up crying at her, and I don't know her. And other parents are coming, and so now I'm like in an alleyway sobbing with a stranger.
And unable to navigate the situation with Echo.
I didn't pick her up.
You actually
I came away without her.
Left without picking her up.
I was not able to pull that off.
Yeah.
And didn't make it to that dinner.
Oh, that's right. Yes, we also had to
actually failed at going to the dinner as well.
So this is an excellent example of how things can go awry for you even further if you begin to act from a survival place rather than taking the time to do the processing and the emotional work to get back to your executive brain and then choose some action. So, number one is no action. If you forget everything else from this, remember that when you're triggered, you don't act yet.
When you're triggered, you'll hit a car. Just have that as your shortcut.
That's the metaphor. Okay, so then the second step is to begin to investigate this story. And the way to do that in trying again to create some distance between the issue and the feelings that you're having about it is to tell the story in such a way that you're recognizing that it's your story. So you can say something like, the story as I see it, or the way I relate to this, or the way I'm experiencing this, or I have the sense that, as a way to begin to tell your story of what's happening. So something like, I'm having the experience that this traffic is really triggering to me, or really upsetting, or really awful, or like the worst thing ever. But then, again, owning that as your story. And then the next step 3, is you continue that on. If that's true, then, and you fill in the blank.
So if it's true that this traffic is stopping me from getting to everything that's important to me and in my way, then I feel rage.
Yeah. Or if you can't, or if there's there might be other steps in the story before you get to the feeling. So step 3 is about investigating the rest of the story. If it's true, then this is also true. And if that's true, then this other thing is also true.
So if the traffic is stopping me from getting to my job, then I don't have a job. Like that can't be what happens. Yeah. And if that's true, I don't have a job, then I don't think my partner is going to want to be with me, so then I don't have a partner.
And
if
we
my
can't
partner-
feed ourselves.
Yeah, if my partner, we can't feed ourselves. I don't have a partner. Definitely don't have my house. And if that's all true, then I guess I'm homeless, and I don't think I'd be able to keep my friend. So I'm homeless and alone, and might as well die. That's my story here about this traffic.
And then the next place you go to is I feel. So as Natalie was already jumping in with that example in the first case,
Sorry.
that's okay. No, you're doing it how you would. You investigate the story. The way I experience this is, or the way I'm having a sense that if that's true, then this, and if that's true, then this, and the way I feel about that is. And the idea, if possible, is to see if you can name at least 3, because often the first one comes up it's like it's an entryway. For instance, anger is often one that comes up for folks as an umbrella emotion that's protecting them from more uncomfortable feelings under that, like sadness and powerlessness and worry. And so sometimes we go to anger first, but if we dig a little deeper, we find that there's other feelings that are even more uncomfortable underneath that.
And I can imagine that you're hearing this and you're thinking, well, I know that the traffic, if I get stuck in traffic, I'm not going to be homeless, so I don't think this works for me. We're not saying that this story is true. And in fact, that might be helpful for you to say, even though I know the story isn't true, it's like the traffic is in my way, it's stopping me from getting what I want, and then I'm going to lose my job, my boss is going to be so mad at me, and blah, 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 blah. It's that helps you to say it that way, say it that way. Or some people feel more comfortable explaining it or exploring it by saying, worst case scenario, I'm late to work and my boss is so mad I lose my job. And if that's true, like whatever allows you to explore it, because the story is a place where you can mine for the feelings, and that's your gold.
Right. And as we've discussed in, I think it was in Why Feelings Suck, we talked about the experience of a surface issue. No, that's the trigger one. Why we get so triggered, which is the one we did last week. We talked about how surface issues tend to tap into reservoirs of emotion that we already have. And so living into the story and investigating the story and the further ramifications of that story gives you a chance to dig in deeper to the feelings that are being triggered. If you're immediately in touch with the feelings, then you can just jump straight to that, as Natalie did in the first example that she was giving me.
And another way to stay with it longer, so that you don't just now act, like you want to actually give yourself time being with the emotion, because you're waiting for your brain chemistry to change, which actually takes time. It's not an instantaneous thing. Unless you're dropping into your survival brain state, that is instantaneous, but to climb out of it, it takes longer. So we suggest a couple other questions, like, this feeling that I'm having right now, have I ever felt this way before? Because it's likely that if you're feeling it now over maybe something small or whatever, if it's strong, it means it's probably familiar, you felt it before. And if that's true, you can follow it back. Did I feel this way in my 20s? Did I feel this way in high school? Like, did I notice it in elementary school?
Or even, does this remind me of a particular time when I had this same feeling?
Yeah, and typically, even asking yourself that question, you'll be surprised at what memories pop up that you maybe didn't have access before that moment.
And doing that, as Natalie was saying, it's giving your brain a chance to do the neurochemical process of shifting your state and allowing you to release some of the historical feelings that you've been carrying that are associated or resonating with the instance or the experience that you're having. So, like the rage that you've been carrying that was brought to the surface or activated for you by traffic, that you've had it for a while, and so investigating that reservoir gives you an opportunity to release more of it. And so, beyond asking yourself, when was the last time I felt this way, or does this remind me of a time when I felt this way, you can even go back to, what's my earliest memory of this feeling? When was the first time I really recall this kind of rage, in this case, coming up for me, and what was that like? And
just to slide in here, that kind of noticing, turning and looking and saying, okay, I see that here, that's actually what emotional healing is. And so in this way, you're using an everyday thing like traffic or whatever, and you just tug on that little thread, that little story, mine for some feelings. That's emotional healing, and that's what we're all after. This is what it looks like. That is, it's not that you then, I don't know, workshop it necessarily. Even just noticing it when it comes up, just turning your gaze on it has healing built into it.
Yes. And this modality of checking when a recent time when you felt this way and then when the first time you felt this way is actually part of a healing modality that we use in doing emotional healing work with people. So we know literally it's part of the protocol of doing emotional healing. So
when you mind for the feelings and you find some.
Yeah, once you've actually found some feelings to work with, then we refer you back to the same feelings process that we've been talking about throughout these videos. And we use that mnemonic, notice, name, touch. So you notice, oh, okay, so I have this rage, and actually underneath that is some powerlessness, and underneath that is maybe some fear. And there maybe are stories that are related to that too. And then, so you're noticing that, you're naming those feelings as you are in touch with them, and then doing the touch part. You again can, since we're talking about the version where you're by yourself, you can add touch for yourself by putting your palm to your heart, or to the back of your neck, or to your own forehead. Each of these is kind of a touchstone to trigger your system to experience you as being connected with during the emotional process. And then also we've talked about before, and just quickly remind you that you can also do the internal touch. So while you have your hand to your heart, you can tune in, or hand to the back of your neck. You can tune into what are the felt sensations that I'm present to right now in this feeling. So with the rage and the powerlessness and the fear, what is that? How does that show up in my body? And you tend to notice things like your heart rate, or how deep your breathing is, or if your stomach's hurting, or if you have a headache, or you have a pain in the neck, or maybe your feet are itchy, or your back is hurting. There's all kinds of physical sensations that show up with emotion. And so naming those, and then going back through and checking back in on the 2 or 3 that you were able to really tune into. So you go back to your heart. What's it doing now? Well, now the heart rate's a little slower. And my breathing's a little deeper. And that pain in my head, now it's just a little pressure. And then you go back through another time. What is happening with my heart now? And what's happening with my breathing now? And what's happening with my forehead now? Just checking back on them over a few minutes, so that you not only are telling your brain kind of what your body is doing and connecting that the somatic elements with the emotional elements, but you're also giving yourself a chance to do more emotional processing. And as you continue to watch those felt sensations, you'll notice that they return to a regulated state. And that's kind of also where you're headed.
And then, once you're in a regulated state, you've provided emotional safety for yourself, so the emotions have lifted, green light, chemical change, so now you have access to your executive brain. And from there, you circle back and you take a peek at that issue. And generally from your executive brain, the issue looks different, because it's not now it's not needed as a place for your feelings. It has a different character, different size, different potency. And sometimes when you peak, all the emotions come back, right? You go and you look at the issue, yeah, I really don't like it, right? So then you're back in your emotional brain, and you just repeat the process. Okay, I'm noticing this time these feelings, and this is what's happening in my body. You just repeat. And then you peak again, and maybe you have a little less emotion, you do it again. Eventually you can,
That's mine.
Yeah.
So, that's okay. She's jumping ahead on the outline, but that's all right. If you notice that you have less charge around the issue, then you consider if there's anything to address about it. So, like as Natalie was showing you do the peaking and you're looking back at the issue. If you don't get re-triggered, then you know that you've gone through the brain shift, and you have an opportunity to address the issue in a way from your executive brain rather than from your emotional or your survival brain. Often the issue evaporates once it's done the job of inviting an emotional release. So it may be that you look back at the issue and it's like, oh, no big deal. I don't even know why I was worried about it. Or, it's easily fixable. But if there is something to do to address it, then that often is way easier because you've gotten the ability to address it back from getting your executive capabilities back. That means you have more creative problem-solving ability, you have more self-awareness, you have more empathy for others involved, you have more impulse control, you have motor mastery, you have all kinds of proclivities that you don't have when you're in your emotional brain or your survival brain. So fixing things, if there's anything to fix, becomes way more efficient.
Yeah, so back to that example from earlier, the client who had made a mistake with one of her clients. She had set up a payment plan that basically meant the person was not going to be paying hardly anything at all. And when she realized it, she was in a total panic. She had, looking at it together, she had shame flooding her body. She also had anger, maybe a little bit at the lady, like taking her up on this offer of this, the nerve.
Right. Which makes sense. I mean, the shame, sure, but then resentment is a protective kind of emotion for shame.
Like, she should have let me know that this was a totally unreasonable payment plan.
Right.
And from there, her instinct, meaning her survival instinct, was to shut the computer, bail out completely, not think about it, not address it, and hate that lady forever after. And then she gets the free thing, and that was it. That was like her whole plan.
Right. Yes.
But instead, she sat with the feelings, she noticed them, she looked at their qualities, she noticed what was happening in her body, and she let time pass, did not act. And when she was ready to act, she emailed her and said, "There's been a mistake." She wasn't apologetic. "I'm so sorry, I misled you." There was no appeasing, bowing or scraping. She wasn't like, "Oh, you didn't mention to me that you're getting a free deal." She just said, "There's been a mistake. That's not the way it was supposed to be set up. How would you like to handle it? I can refund you your money, or I can set up this different payment plan." And the person said, "This is really important to me, and I would like to pay however it means that I get it. I'm so excited to be in it, and I want to do even more with you," right? So from her executive brain, she problem solved, developed a further connection with the person, and secured future income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because executive brains are really good at stuff.
Right. Yes. Right. So rather than blowing up the situation or slamming the computer shut and never doing any more business, she was able to be with herself through the process and then address it in not only an efficient way, but a really clean, smart, adept way.
What she came away with was a real sense of integrity.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is the comprehensive process for once you find yourself triggered and how to navigate that without making the situation worse. We will show you in a future workshop about how to do this with others, and then also how to know if you're in a survival reaction. So be sure to tune into those. And we'll also go in way more depth with all of the material that we've been covering and a number of the things that we're going to continue covering if you come to our retreat. And that is going to be May 3rd through 10th on the Big Island of Hawaii. And we're going to spend a week together going really deep into this emotional processing stuff for yourself, for holding space with someone else, for reprogramming how your habits around processing emotion, and how to navigate boundaries with people that you're in relationship, especially because those can have lots of feelings elements to them. And so it's this comprehensive week-long process where you get to have us with you. You get to practice these things that we're talking about and have us be there to tweak you. Oh, what if you try this, or what if you do that, or how about if we hold space in this way or that way, to make sure that by the end of the week you really have a clear sense of how to do this. And not only just like the knowledge of it, but in your bones of how to do it, so that even when you're triggered, you'll still be able to navigate the process, instead of, like for some folks, just learning about this and then you get triggered, you forget it because you lose access to your executive brain. So having this boost of being with us for the week and really diving deep in this beautiful, wonderful location, also enjoying the aloha life and going to the beach and having community, all these really lovely elements that we're putting together so that it's a very safe container, a very comfortable container for doing this really deep work together.
That's what I was going to say is all the things that your parents didn't do when you were little that set you up to be in a survival mode for life. We're going to do those things that they didn't do. We're offering that to you. It's like if you want to call it reparenting or rewiring, we're going to show you what it looks like to receive that, and then what effects that has, and sort of start to get it set up as your new mode.
Yeah. So we'd love to have anyone who's interested, who's been watching these series with us, who'd like to find out more about that. We're going to put a link in the comments under this video for you to find out more, and if you enjoy what you find out there, you can sign up for a quick session with us to have a chat and see if the retreat is the right thing for you.
We'll be honest with you.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. We only want you to come if it's going to be great for you.
I want it to be right for you.
Yeah. So thanks for tuning in with us today. We did this one this week because we're not going to be able to do one next week. And we just wanted to make sure to give you some material to work with. But if you haven't yet, we encourage you to go back on my personal Facebook page and watch our previous 2 videos, Why Feelings Suck, and what's the other one? Why Am I So Triggered?
Why we're so triggered.
Why We're So Triggered. And we hope you enjoy what you've seen here, and we hope it helps you with your feelings process.
Thank you.
Yeah. Be well.